the guys from Ping, they've kind of shown me how much the equipment matters.
I just love that I can hit any shot I kind of want.
We're going to be able to tell some fun stories about what goes on here to help golfers play better golf.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Ping Proving Grounds podcast. I'm Shane Bacon, joined as always by Marty Jertson. Marty, not where you live necessarily, not where Ping exists, but in a lot of parts of the country, it's cooling off, and golfers still want to get their golf in, and they still want to look at new product. A lot of the new products come out in January typically, and so I wanted to chat a little bit with you today about fitting, specifically the difference in fitting indoors and outdoors, because obviously everybody wants to hit shots off grass, but not everybody can, especially in the winter months. So I kind of wanted to lean on you about the big differences in what happens when you get fit, let's say indoors, off mats, things like that, versus, going to the proving grounds, getting fit on perfect grass in ideal conditions.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think it's a lot. It's weighing on the minds of a lot of golfers and actually a lot of club fitters. It's one of our most common question from fitters, because a lot of fitting environments are indoors, is, hey, what are these differences? What can I do with my golfer, right, to simulate more of an outdoor environment? Let's compare and contrast some of those differences. And getting fit indoors is not all a negative thing, right? I'll give a few examples of this. To get fit outdoors, you have the advantage of, if you have a launch monitor, your fitter has a launch monitor that can track full downrange ball flight. That's an advantage, right? You also can hit off the turf, so you can really evaluate the turf interaction of the golf club for your irons or wedges. Those are some of the really big advantages in the outdoor environment. You can see visually the curve. Luckily, nowadays, launch monitors are great. You can get nice curve information in indoor environments as well. So those are the advantages of getting fit outdoors. But a lot of times it's hard to find a facility that you can hit really premium golf balls outdoors, right? It's rare. It is rare.
Point.
We're lucky here at the Proving Grounds. We're hitting Pro V1Xs
right,
and things of that nature. The tour players, they get to hit premium golf balls. So an advantage of getting fit indoors is that you can hit premium golf balls, right? So while you're not getting that full downrange flight, hopefully you're on a launch monitor that can has really good simulation techniques for being able to simulate that full downrange flight. And actually hitting premium golf balls will give you sometimes better launch and spin numbers than hitting outdoors with a bad golf ball, but you do get to see the full downrange flight, right? So there's some pros and cons between those two different scenarios there. Another advantage of getting fit indoors, and sometimes we do this when we run tests, Shane, especially if you're trying to figure out if somebody's compensating. You let's say we give you a club with a lie angle that's 2 degrees upright. You might hit your first shot, you pull it to the right for you as a left-handed golfer. Your next one, you compensate. You stand closer, you raise your hands, you do all this stuff, right? Now, in an indoor environment, a really skilled fitter can turn the screen off for a couple shots.
Interesting.
And blind you, right? And take out a little bit of that bias. You have no feedback loop. John Graham, who's one of our ambassadors here, does this with his tour players when they putt. He'll have them hit left to righters and right to lefters. He'll have them hit the putt. He'll immediately kick the ball out of the way, but he'll measure where it would have gone with his launch monitor. So he effectively is doing this in an outdoor environment. So indoors, you can actually do that, and a skilled fitter can use this to their advantage, specifically when you're fitting, for example, let's say lie angle on your irons, and you're trying to make sure this player is not doing anything to accommodate for the particular ball flight, and you want to see how they naturally deliver. That can actually be an advantage in an indoor environment. So premium golf ball, really good friction. You can get arguably sometimes better, more consistent like launch condition numbers from having that good friction. And you can, if you have a skilled fitter, be able to eliminate some of the bias. Just turn off the screen for a little bit, have them hit some shots, see how they're delivering it. They can look at the numbers on their screen, but you just mask the simulation from the player in the simulator. And those can be some of the advantages with the indoor fitting environment.
What about the numbers? Like in terms of what numbers might look like outdoors on a grass driving range versus numbers indoors?
Yeah, driver's going to generally be the same. Again, we've kind of talked a little
Off a
bit.
tee, yeah.
Yep, off a tee, pretty clean. So driver's generally going to be the same as long as you can kind of make sure your tee height is representative of how you would tee it outdoors. That can be a little tricky with some of the tees and things of that nature. But driver will generally be almost identical indoors to outdoors. Once you get into a fitting club that we and most of the industry uses is a 7-iron or around a 7-iron, there's really good news there. Most of the time, your spin numbers will be very similar to outdoor conditions off the ground, right? Now, I say that with a very big asterisk that actually the type of mat you hit off can actually change this a good bit.
Okay.
Some mats, players can kind of hit the mat before the ball, get a little dust, or some of the little fibers of the mat will kind of get kicked up and get between the ball and the face and change the spin a little bit. But I think generally the good news is that we are fitting with 7-irons. A lot of the industry is fitting with 7-irons. Your launch and spin can be pretty similar. But Shane, this changes when it comes to wedges. So
Okay.
Here's my advice for folks. This may seem a little weird, but if you're going to go get fit for wedges, bring a little spray bottle with you. Bring your little spray bottle full of water with you to your wedge fitting. Hopefully your fitter has one and they're doing this protocol. A lot of our fitters are doing this protocol. Well, they will have you hit wedges off the mat, clean and dry, clean the face, dry everything, grooves are clean, and compare them to your gamer, compare them to some other wedges you want to be trying in your fitting process, and then spritz the golf ball with water. And what you want to look at is the difference in spin. And you can look at launch angle too, but these things will be tied very close together between the dry scenario and when you introduce moisture. That's going to tell you how much spin retention that club face technology has. That's a great thing for the consumer to look at. So you may get a little funny look there, but that's a little direct to consumer empowerment technique you can use to bring into your fitting environment.
Marty, I'm excited in 5 years from now for you to have numbers on like Fiji water versus smart water. Like, I know you're going to eventually dive into that and get a good feel for it. This is what tap water does to a golf ball versus, the really elite electrolyte water. But that's a very interesting thing. I'd never thought about that. Is like trying to recreate any condition possible indoors.
Yes.
The other thing I've always been interested about in terms of fitting is, and players have talked a lot about this in terms of their practice, right? Is some guys want to go sit on the range for 2 hours and hit 107 irons, but some guys want it to feel a little bit more like they're playing a round. What advice would you give a player that's getting indoor fitting that to make it feel a little bit more like you're hitting golf shots versus just 7-iron after 7-iron after 7-iron?
Yeah, we like to call that game-like fitting.
Okay.
Right? And it's great that whether it's TrackMan or Foresight or one of the other launch monitors or simulator software, I've seen SkyTrack has some really cool visuals now where they put literally a wall there. You can create some really good visuals now with launch monitors have become simulators. They've married into one thing. So there's a lot of great things you can do there. TrackMan simulation tools are great. We use some of their tools where you can put a player on a golf hole, right? And you want the player to feel in some scenarios, some part of their fitting. So at the beginning of the fitting, you're doing foundational things. You're doing height, wrist to floor. You're kind of getting lie angle dialed in. You're getting launch conditions dialed in. Then when you want to really make sure that's the right lie angle for the player, you want to put a little stress on them to see where their miss might show up. That's where you can gamify it. And we call that game-like fitting, Shane. And what we'll do there is if we can have a tool like TrackMan, we can pick a course, a hole. Let's pretend like we're doing a driver. You got a little water over to the right, a little more room to the left, but still a little penalizing. We can pick a few holes that's going to be representative of what that player is going to see on the golf course and focus them in. We'll take away all the barrel of balls. So the fitter controls the golf ball. You hand the player one ball at a time.
Interesting.
So you got one ball at a time. You try to put them in a scenario that's going to be like an on-course situation and have the player hit that shot. What you can also do is have them hit that shot, then have them hit maybe a couple wedges, talk to them for a little bit, make them take a 1-minute break or 30-second break, right? And then nudge the player, have them go through their full routine, gamify it a little bit. So there's a lot you can do there in the fitting, especially as it gets later in the fitting where you're trying to make those final selections. Is the shaft right? Is the swing weight right? Do I have the CG shifter? Should I put it in the fade for this player, the center position? You're getting to the fine adjustments in the fitting that you'll want to do a little bit of that gamification, some of that A/B testing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It happens in fitting, also happens in instruction. And, not every instructor in the world can do it. But I've got a new instructor I've been working with out in Connecticut. He works out of the country club at Darien. And I think it was our third or fourth lesson, 30 minutes hitting balls. He goes, all right, let's go to the golf course, and let's go out to the golf course and see if what we're talking about now plays when you're actually hitting a golf shot on a golf hole, because the golfer sees the stuff, right? We see trouble left. We see a tucked hole location. We feel the bailout being where the bailout might exist in. And it's just such a good thing to do in general as a golfer, is to make it as round normal as possible,
Yep. And I go back to Shane with how can we make fittings more like a tour fitting? Because here's how a tour fitting goes, right? We got the truck there. We're there on Monday. Players like, hey, things are a little off with my driver. Let's do some work, right? So maybe we build them a new driver. We got a new shaft. Maybe this player wants to try a little longer length to get a little more ball speed. And we got a new shaft, new driver length, maybe a new golf ball came out, right? What are they going to do? They hit some on the range, get it dialed in. They go play 9 holes Monday afternoon or Tuesday. They're going to play 9. They're going to take it to the course, right? So I think you painted the exact scenario, whether it's instruction or fitting. They have a lot of similarities. That's what the better player does. Not everyone can do that and go out to the golf course. So how can you bring that level of stress, gamification, put a little heat on it, the right amount for the player and the environment, and bring that into the fitting scenario? At the Ping Proving Grounds, you've been here, Shane, where we have the post on the end of our range, exactly 20 yards wide. So for some players, it's like, hey, you 2 of those posts, 40 yards. That's going to be an average fairway width for a lot of players. You get a tour player in, and you get them in a major environment, their fairway's going to be 20 yards wide. We use those posts to gamify the fitting. There's a lot to taking away all the balls and just having one golf ball there. I'll tell you that as well. That's a nice little hack.
It's really, really smart. Marty, it feels like we're in a world now where indoor fitting has surpassed outdoor fitting. It feels like the majority of fittings these days are indoor. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think we see that, whether it's, our partners at PGA Tour Superstore or Golf Galaxy or Second Swings, and they have beautiful fitting bays, right?
Yep.
And the benefit is again, it's not all negative. The benefit is that you have great launch monitors that are measuring the key metrics that you care about, right? I think one thing, Shane, I did want to bring up is the turf interaction. You don't have the turf interaction. So what do you do when you're fitting lie angle and analyzing things of that nature? So we have some tools here, right? We have grind tape. You can put grind tape on the bottom. Very skilled fitters, and I highly encourage this.
What is grind tape? Can you just expand on that a bit?
Yeah, grind tape is a diagnostic tape. It's a tape when you mark it on a mat or one of our lie boards, which we now call the diagnostic board, kind of a plexiglass board you hit off. It gives you a visual representation of where you're contacting. What is the pressure distribution along the bottom of the club? And that can be a proxy for what your turf interaction may be like out on the golf course, right? So we put this tape on the bottom of the club, maybe your wedges, if you're doing a wedge fitting. And if somebody hits if they mark, or that pressure, that contact is closer to the lead edge, they're generally steeper with a lot of shaft lean. So we can go to more bounce, generally, right? If somebody contacts closer to the trailing edge, they generally have a little less shaft lean and or might be a little shallower on their angle of attack. We can go to less bounce and try to get that golf ball contacting on the face a little bit higher, right? So this is a really good kind of visual indication that can be a proxy for bounce. And we can also use that lie tape or diagnostic tape that we put on the bottom of the club for lie angle fitting. And the big thing I want to stress to everybody with lie angle fitting indoors, even though there's tools out there and launch monitors can measure your 3D dynamic delivered lie angle, that is not how you set up to the club at address, but you got the droop of the shaft, the hands raised going into impact based on the forces that you're applying to the club. So the dynamic delivery of that club, a lot of fitters and even consumers, and it seems very logical to try to get that zeroed out. Like you want the line goal delivered perfectly at impact, and that's what you should shoot for. And they won't pay attention to the spin on the golf ball or the curve of the golf ball. We have seen a lot of players, their perfect fitting in their irons, they will deliver it slightly flat. Some players actually slightly upright, but you're solving for curve of the golf ball, right? You want to minimize the spin axis. And I would use minimizing your spin axis or curve as a more important metric from a launch monitor than trying to get zeroed out on line goal, even though that sounds very good in theory, right? Because there's other ways manipulating the shaft lean, manipulating the torque and twist and the 3D delivery of the club face, a little bit open, a little bit closed. Every player has a little bit of variability in how they do that. Even our tour players, they all do it a little bit differently, but they all solve for hitting that ball very straight from a curve perspective when it comes to line goal fitting.
It sounds like something you're saying across both platforms, if you're getting fit outdoors or indoors, is trying to make it feel as golfy as possible. It's like warm up the same, wear something you'd wear when you're playing golf. Don't try to overswing or underswing. It's like do everything you can to allow the fitter to see who you are as the golfer you are, not somebody you're trying to be or not somebody you know the numbers. Don't try to beef up your numbers just because you want it to look better to the fitter, because you got to go live with the golf clubs that you just got fit for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a good fitter also, and our tour fitters are great at this, will have players not, if it's a better player, you got to know who you're fitting, right?
Yep.
So if you're a higher handicap player and you don't hit punch shots, you're not changing your trajectory, you're just trying to master your one skill, full swing, hit the ball solid. That's what you should be doing in your fitting. Now let's go to, I remember we were doing this with Hunter Mahan, Shane. He would have an issue where when he hit a 3/4 trajectory shot, his dynamic delivery would change and he'd pull it, right?
Okay.
So we would always be stressing him in his fitting. It's very easy to get the tour player to come in and hit their stock shot and pure every single one. We could give them a different line goal, they'll adjust. Give them a different shaft, they'll adjust. Where their issues show up is when they start hitting ball above their feet shot, ball below their feet shot, 3/4 shot, control your spin. Things start to change a little bit. So you need a good fitter will have different tools in their toolbox. So if you're a better player, I would say go in there and actually try to hit, let's say you're getting fit for irons, hit some shots where you're trying to curve it a little bit if that's something you do. Hit some little draws, hit some little fades, hit some knockdown shots. Make that part of your fitting. If you're a higher handicap player, you're just trying to have your one swing and do it good, that's what you should do in that fitting environment. In both cases, Shane, I think you nailed it. Try to represent the types of shots that you're going to be able to hit on the golf course. And it's really fun to gamify it. And you can do this yourself out there without a fitter knowing you're doing it. You can kind of guide yourself and put a little stress on yourself during that fitting process.
When Ping comes out with new equipment, how long does a fitting, like when you have to fit a tour player for new equipment, all the new equipment that Ping's coming out for, how long do those fittings last? Are they a couple hours long? Is it an hour?
Yeah, sometimes some of our elite players, man, we'll go spend a half a day with them, right?
Wow.
And the reason why, Shane, let's say we wanna get them some equipment, and then we'll go play 9 holes with them or 6 holes, right? We want to get that player on the golf course. It's not something everybody has access to. I realize that, but on the tour level, absolutely. Like a lot of times, we'll get them into the equipment. Then it's always in the minds of the better player. Okay, let me go see how this does on the course.
Yeah.
Right. That's the default. You got to take it to the golf course. So when we're launching something with our PGA Tour, our top players, we'll take it out on the golf course. And like I said, I think for the everyday golfer, even myself, I'm here at the Proving Grounds, we're going to try to bring that on course into the fitting, and it's super fun. That's actually a big area we're still working on, is how can we gamify and create really good protocols to kind of have that on-course type environment during your fitting.
Has there ever been a thought in terms of like adding terrain to the range at Ping, like adding it where you can create lies that are above your feet, or you can stand up taller than where the ball is. Has there ever been a thought into putting I mean, I know it's not the largest range on the planet, but it's a pretty big driving range.
Yeah.
Is there an area that you've thought about making ground where you could force players to hit those types of shots?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Shane. That is something we're working on. And I think it's something that the golf community has really enjoyed. If you've seen kind of the putt view type of mats, or platforms, the ability to change slope. And it's an active area of research for us. We've just done some academic research on that. Like, hey, if golfers have the ball below their feet, above the feet, how does their dynamic delivery change? We've done some motion capture research with our European performance team. That's really fun. So that's something we're actually diving into at the moment. Active area of research for us, even including on the putting side, right? Because we have our outdoor green, where we have it 3D scanned. We have a map of it, just like the tour books and things of that nature, so we can go and pick those very specific slopes. We've seen the benefits of that in the short game area, and we do think there is a space for that in the full swing side of the club fitting process. Yes.
Marty, you're going to be the worst retired person ever. You're just going to be texting your predecessor and saying, we should do this. Have you thought about this? It's going to be, they're going to block your number at some point. Be like, I'm done with this guy. He's retired. He's moved on. He's going to keep going. But for now, Ping has you. And we get so many of these insights that are so interesting. And I love always pushing. That's something I've found so interesting doing this podcast with you and so many of the people that have been involved in the podcast that work at Ping, is that push to continue to be great, right? I mean, you can't be stagnant in this business in any capacity. If you're a player, if you're a manufacturer, if you're a coach, any of these things, you can't just stay the same because the game changes so often. But, seeing the constant push to improve, even, with how good everything is at Ping, is very, very cool to see. So there you go. As we said, winter months are upon us, and a lot of people are going to try to get fit for some new clubs. And now don't be so scared about getting fit indoors, because it'll be just as good as getting fit outdoors.
Absolutely, Shane. One other thing I'd say about getting fit indoors is you'll get really good launch conditions for, let's say you're fitting 7-iron and driver. Jot them down. Jot down your ball speed, launch, and spin.
Okay.
And then consider pairing the golf ball using Ballnamic. So that's our ball fitting website, our ball fitting tool. That's the ultimate cherry on top, because you're going to get really good launch condition numbers with a premium golf ball indoors. Jot down your driver and 7-iron, ball speed, launch, and spin if you go out there. And then that's where you can marry your club fitting, your ball fitting synergistically. So one last little tip there to get the most out of indoor fitting environment.
Indoor fittings. It's going to get cold. I'm not excited about the cold, but I do lean on the indoor golf facilities a decent amount in the winter months. Marty, appreciate the time and the insight as always. This is the Ping Proving Grounds podcast.